What advice would you give to someone looking to quit porn? It isn't that you're trying to quit porn. It's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that you're trying to figure out how to have a better life. And so you have to figure out, well, I would say do the future authoring program and keep your porn addiction in mind and think what your life could be like in 3 to 5 years if you took care of yourself like you were someone that you cared for. Then it asks you questions about your friends and your family and your career and your time outside of work and your health and, the important dimensions of life. And it asks you to spend 20 minutes writing about how good your life could be in 3 to 5 years if you got your act together and did what was good for you. And then it asks you to write about the hell you could be in if you didn't. And so I would say you really need to do that, because porn isn't the issue. The issue is that you're not living your life the way you want to. So you need a vision of life that's more compelling than the porn. And you need a counter vision too that frightens you, because otherwise porn is obviously extraordinarily gratifying in the short term, but you seem to be suffering from the medium to long-term consequences of its use. And so you need a story that you can tell yourself that's really deeply thought through about why this is not appropriate for you, how it's hurting you, and how it's minimizing you, perhaps making you embarrassed and ashamed and more socially isolated, and all of that. Think about it as cleaning up your psyche and your behavior rather than merely stopping porn. You also might want to write down everything bad that you think porn is doing to you, because obviously you have some suspicions that this is not good for you, that it's actually harming you in some important way. You need to be fully cognizant of what those ways are and then take them seriously and decide if that's the pathway through life on which you wish to travel.
When I first decided to stop, I thought I'd try writing down every time a thought came to watch pornography, and I couldn't believe it the first day. It seemed like almost like once a minute. I don't know what you think about this, but what I would do is when I'd get the thought to do it, I'd bite down on my thumb in one particular spot. And then I found that the next few days, the thoughts were just coming less and less. And now that it's been a month, I rarely have the thought. I just feel so much more aware, and I'm not seeking pleasure as much. I'm just enjoying going for walks and being in nature.
Then you said that it really plagued you badly for the first day or two and then started to decrease quite precipitously after that. And that's a good example of how behavior extinguishes if you cease rewarding it. The less porn, the better. To the degree that use of porn and masturbation is undermining your sense of yourself and providing you with a dearth of motivational reasons to get out there and engage with a real partner, then it's definitely not in your best interest, and that's what your conscience is telling you. There isn't any more obvious manifestation of the expedient at the expense of the meaningful than pornography and masturbation, and that's hardly a heroic path. So maybe the less of it, the better. If you're masturbating to pornography and the consequence of that is an immediate influx of guilt, then you have to ask yourself who's in control. That's a really important question, who's in control. If your behavior is embarrassing you, well, there's only two possibilities, isn't there? You shouldn't be so embarrassed. And I suppose the voice that says yes to all expression of human sexuality would say that your guilt and shame is merely the detrimental hangover of an oppressive patriarchy that's judgmental in its attitudes towards sexuality. Well, what would you use judgment to differentiate if it isn't sexuality? So I don't think that argument goes anywhere. You have to consult your own conscience. Like, I know the conscience can become an oppressive force on its own. That's the indwelling of the great tyrant, and Freud made much of that, a too oppressive superego. And I've certainly seen clients whose expression of healthy sexuality was inhibited by a too rigid superego. That can definitely happen. But that doesn't mean that all guilt about all forms of sexual expression constitutes a superego run amok. If you're ashamed about your sexual behavior, then you have to ask yourself, is the shame wrong or is the sexual behavior wrong? And I'm asking you, I'm not judging your behavior, because what the hell do I know about you? Is your shame what you should be dispensing with, or the behavior? And it might be a little of column A and a little of column B, because life is never simple. But if you don't feel ennobled by your porn-related masturbation, then perhaps that means it's of questionable utility. I certainly don't see it as a stabilizing social force. I don't see it as something people do in public and brag about. I know that sexual behavior is private and should remain that way, but you get what I'm driving at. I think people shouldn't lie, especially to themselves. And I think repeatedly engaging in a behavior that you judge yourself to be morally reprehensible is a form of performative contradiction, which is the
acting out of a lie. And I suspect you know that, or you wouldn't be asking the question. And so, what should you do with pornography? Well, you know the answer to that, and so does everybody else. It's not good for those who produce it. It's not good for those who participate, wittingly or unwittingly, because there's plenty of them, in its production. It's not good for its consumers, or certainly not the highest good. And what's the highest good? Sexuality incorporated within functional, intimate relationship, bound by vows of mutual celibacy. That stabilizes our families, it stabilizes our societies, it stabilizes our psyches. And so anything you do that isn't in service of that goal is likely to be counterproductive. If your sexual behavior isn't an expression of your highest being, it isn't serving you in the deepest sense. You're serving it. And that's what your shame indicates. Get out there and find a partner and commit to her or him